That's right. Right, so here I am in Cape Town, and if you've picked this up yet, you may have sort of realized in these videos, from one day to the next, one is in a different place. One's in either up the Garden Route in George, or further down near Mossel Bay, Cape Town. This evening I'll be in Velddrif, which is up the west coast of South Africa. After that, hundreds of kilometers north of that, and then into Namibia. So I think you get an idea that each day you're somewhere else, and it's a completely different setup. They're different people, they're different kind of logistical issues. Right at this moment I'm waiting for a Mercedes-Benz to be delivered. I need to go and fetch my license. I need to just do a little bit of admin as well, and yeah, you know, it's the end of the month. Rent is due. Transactions with the bank need to be finalized, that sort of thing. But yeah, so I mean, I'm just trying to give you guys a little bit of a context into what goes on, you know, with regard to you know, the journey to writing these stories, to getting the material. It involves quite a lot of movement. It involves a lot of one thing you guys aren't actually seeing is the people that are involved, and I think we're going to address that a little bit later. I have actually contacted a guy who's writing a book on the killer of I think her name was Julia Wheeler, but she was murdered in Knysna, and this particular writer feels that she was wrongly convicted. In my opinion, I think he was wrongly convicted. In my opinion, I disagree, but it'll be interesting for us to have that discussion. So I have invited him. He is here in Cape Town. Whether Alan wants to meet up is another story, or another question. We'll see about that. Before I sort of finish up this video, I just want to touch on a couple of things. Some people watching this may be thinking, you know, what's this all about? It just seems like this sort of self-indulgent thing, and etc. Basically, these videos are really meant for the readers of our 8 or 9 books on Oscar Pistorius. That's really where we dealt with Oscar in detail. The idea of these videos isn't to rehash what we spoke about in the books that much. It's really just to provide a little bit of color and a little bit of visual context to some of the personal insights that are put into that narrative. So that's really the idea. We are going to obviously be getting to the nitty-gritty of interrogating Oscar as we get to the appeal. Then we're going to be kind of reporting more on that, and that's just a little bit later. In a way, this is kind of just a bit of an introduction. It's an introduction to especially overseas folks who don't know what it's like on the ground in South Africa. And then yeah, and then it's also trying to give a little bit of I guess reality to some of those psychological aspects that we discuss, especially in the narratives like transcendence and #RS and restoration. The interesting thing is, you know, a lot of people come to these stories only wanting to hear about the crime and the criminal, and that sort of, we try to turn it around. We deal with that in exhaustive detail, but we try to turn it around and then address issues of our society and our attitudes to to ourselves, our attitudes to lovers, our attitudes to the media, our attitudes to reality. And these may seem like small issues, but you know, even on this little journey that I've been on, I've had some huge conversations with some of them friends, some of them strangers, some of them somewhere between, people that I sort of know to some extent. And you know, when they ask what I'm doing, and you start touching on those aspects, you end up having these deeply personal conversations which I suspect these people never really have, and yet you kind of get the sense that even though these people are going to work and these people are going through the course of their lives, these feelings and motives are kind of uppermost in that person's mind. It's almost like an elephant in the room, and so what I'm kind of doing is ushering the elephant in and saying, well, let's sort of address it. So what these criminals do, you know, is they basically show us someone in a situation with a certain psychology making a mistake, someone in a certain, caught up in a certain flux of events who make a decision, and it has a lifelong implications. Somebody dies, the prospects for your entire life change, your fate changes, your destiny changes, and we're looking at that and basically saying, you know, we haven't committed a crime. What can we learn from some of those mistakes and apply to coping with our lives and improving our lives? So that's really the psychology. So if it seems a bit touchy-feely, if it seems disconnected, if it seems irrelevant, it's actually not. I can't really say too much more than that. But let me just go into that in a little bit more detail. Written it down here. In terms of my experience and my journey, you know, I think people sort of wonder, you know, what is Riva Steenkamp's story? What is her journey? What is that like? Well, I think what I'm going through is a lot similar to Riva's in a certain sense, and that is, I've just had a bath, right? And where I live, I don't actually have a bath. I've only got a shower. So for me, a simple thing like a bath is a luxury. I actually put a picture on Instagram a few minutes ago just saying that, and you might say, what is the point of that? You know, isn't that self-indulgent? Isn't that, you know, what's the message behind that? Well, the message is that's how humble my lifestyle is at this moment, which is, you know, that a bath is just something that's such a luxury. And you know, in Riva's situation, she was living 7 months in somebody else's home with her best friend, living with a Myers. Now you must remember, this is a 29-year-old woman, and she's living with her best friend almost like a student, you know. And you know, I know what it's like. You know, I've moved 10 times in 10 years. I know how dislocating that is. I know how that impacts one. You know, I know there's tremendous stress involved in moving, and in moving frequently, and it does a lot to your psychology as well. And you know, at the time that Riva died, I'm pretty sure she wanted to kind of reassert herself, but also kind of anchor herself. And you know, you can anchor yourself to a person, you can anchor yourself to a place, you can anchor yourself to a career, you can anchor yourself to a dream. But most of the time we need to be anchored to something while there's this sort of flux going on kind of in the background. And that's also really interesting psychology. It was something I discussed with someone in that place called Homtini that I stayed between the forests of Knysna. There's a person there who's very into meditation, and the whole idea of meditation is creating a very regimented environment where people dress the same, they shave their heads, they look the same, but the point being that you're controlling your environment, and you really anchoring yourself and creating a really stable situation. But how realistic is that, given that the fundamental nature of things is that they change? We grow. You have the change of seasons, you have memories coming in and being lost, you have this change of context, change of information, and so some stability is good, but how much do you need? How much is good, and how much is a prison? Change is also good, but how much is, if one's moving 10 times in 10 years, how much is too much? How much, if there's too much change, too little anchoring, how deep are your roots going to go? How much are you going to develop as a person? So all these thoughts are quite interesting. You might think, again, what does this have to do with the Oscar trial? Well, it has everything to do with it. What were Oscar's roots? Where was his anchor? And what do we learn from Oscar's attitude to, anchoring himself in an idea, which was, I'm able-bodied, anchoring himself into a narrative which is, I'm so able-bodied that I can compete at an Olympic level, and not anchoring himself really, I think, enough in reality, anchoring himself in brands and money, and being a brand ambassador and a kind of a persona, but how much of that persona was real? How much of that persona, when you always wearing prosthetic legs, is real? How much of that persona where you constantly in discomfort with the person you're pretending to be, and what stress does that bring about? So all of this is actually very relevant to Oscar and the Oscar trial. Lisa and I have just taken it further. I mean, we've written about the nitty-gritty of the trial, but we're also trying to bring a lot of those insights back and look at, when we personalize them, what can we learn from them as individuals and society. So this is a little bit about doing that. We're trying to add a bit of color and movement to it by making a video and by bringing you with us on a week's worth of a journey. And it's not the full story, but it's a little section of the pizza, and it's just giving a little piece of the pizza of what you're trying to get at, right? These videos aren't really edited, they're not really planned, it's really just off the cuff, to give you that authentic feel. Some of it may be boring, and then you're welcome to jump ahead, as people do when they're online. You focus on what interests you. And so it's really just a free flow, and it just gives you guys an idea of kind of where we're coming from. What I've written down here on this little flyer is just that by interrogating Oscar, we're interrogating our attitudes to love, to living, to pursuing an authentic life. And authenticity is a major theme running through all our narratives. It is, we basically believe that the reason crimes happen is because of inauthenticity. It's because of someone lying, someone keeping a secret, someone having some kind of dark side to themselves, which is always pushed to the side, and then circumstances come about which bring out all of this. It brings out the shadow side. Some kind of secret is then revealed. So in terms of Valentine's Day, Reva's death, the secret that was kind of revealed, I believe, was that there were a couple, but one of them was Reva not wanting to go with Oscar to help him with his career in terms of going to Manchester or Brazil. And so this was a shift in reality, and then a lot of things come to the fore, and one of them is of course, do you accept me as a disabled person? Do you love me for who I am? Someone saying, well, I'm not coming with you, starts to invalidate that. And of course it was a bit more complicated than that. Reva had her own brands to look after, and so Oscar obviously freaked out based on his own personal career ambitions and also his personal aspirations, and so Reva was invalidating that. And I think Oscar needed a bit of a timeout to realize this wasn't about him, it was also about Reva's dreams and Reva's hopes and what she wanted. And when Oscar saw that Reva was no longer 100% on board with him, I still think she wanted to be in a relationship with him, but wasn't going to be working with him, as a kind of career sidekick. That was a shock to him, and that led to a lot of the arguing that night. And I think everyone knows when you have an interaction with someone and certain information is revealed, some people have that point where it's basically, you've crossed this line and now you mean nothing to me, you know what I mean? Or you've revealed something of myself to me, and I reject that, and thus I reject you. And so I think Reva crossed that line in Oscar's mind, and that was part of him feeling rationalized in killing her. And so again, this is one of those things that we can learn from by studying this case and studying the psychology behind it. So yeah, I mean, Oscar's a great sort of story to go to interrogate ideas of heroism and inauthenticity, and where that leads you. You know, you might say, well, keeping a secret on that's harmless. What does it really mean? Well, it actually means a lot. The stories we tell ourselves, the stories we present to the world also reveal a lot, and eventually put us in a certain place. So yeah, so that's really it. The other side of it, which is I guess kind of interesting, is the life that Reva went on was, I think, to some extent lonely. You know, this whole going to hotels, meeting people, it has a great element to it, which is one feels important. You know, you meet interesting people, but there's another aspect which is lonely, which is you getting from place to place, checking into a new hotel, and you kind of a little bit disconnected in terms of the whole thing. You're a little bit, you connect, disconnect, whatever, and yeah, it can definitely be lonely. And you know, I think what Reva was going through, which I can kind of sense as well, is you like the idea of someone that could maybe look after you, someone who can pay the bills, and someone who can provide you with a home and all that kind of thing. And I think Reva did have kind of a long-term hope or wish that Oscar might be that person, that Oscar certainly had the financial capacity to look after her, and also that she had the depth in herself that she could nurture him. You know, so I think those were basically in place. But I think they probably needed more time to navigate the finer details, and there were many. And I think Oscar was also not very mature when he met Reva. Reva was a lot more mature, and so I think that dynamic was a huge mismatch. Yeah, so that's something. The interesting with Reva choosing Oscar as her savior is that she was choosing essentially a man who couldn't actually stand on his own feet or legs. She was choosing a man to look after her who wasn't really, I don't want to say he wasn't a man, but he wasn't what he seemed to be. And I think this was unacknowledged by both of them. And I think that unacknowledged thing, not so much a secret from Reva's perspective in a way, because I think she knew what Oscar's disability was, but maybe it was more of a secret from Oscar's perspective. It was something he just sort of made as though it wasn't a big deal. Turned out to be an incredibly big deal. And that's part of why Reva needed to be there. The next chapter of Oscar's story was validation. Having a woman at his side. This is my girlfriend. She loves me. She's beautiful. I'm acceptable. I'm a man. You know, I'm a man with a girlfriend. Whatever. That whole sort of validation as a man, as a person, as a certain kind of person. You know. So that was really it. Yeah. So I mean, I hope that's putting things in a bit more context for those who've been raising their eyebrows, not really sure what's going on. I'm going to go and pick up my license now, and I'll try and give you guys some insight into where I am exactly, but it's still misty and rainy outside. Yesterday I drove through 4 hours worth of just mist and rain and wet, and it was pretty draining. It was pretty dangerous as well. and I'm having a few issues with my car, which is stressful. The batteries run down twice now. The first time I left the lights on. The second time it seemed to run down by itself. So I'm a little bit concerned that I've got some additional bills to pay. So that's bugging me a little bit. But otherwise, let's see what happens. Let's keep an open mind. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay, I'm at the Durbanville Traffic Department. I've just picked up my new driver's license. My previous one expired, so and I was actually, I didn't know it expired, so when I was driving a couple of months ago, I was actually pulled over and fined, quite a huge fine, and I wasn't actually aware that it had even expired. It expired a couple of months actually. So yeah, I've actually, this morning just before coming here, I actually had my car jumped the third time, and I was actually really starting to worry. But I think the reason why it needed a jump was basically the cabin light. There's a switch here on the on the car that allows one to turn on the cabin light, and I think the cabin light being on is why the car's battery's been running down. But if it wasn't that, it could have been quite a serious issue. Not just a question of needing to buy a new battery, but possibly some kind of electrical problem. So I'm happy that that's not the case, and yeah, I'm going to be leaving probably at about 2 p.m. for my aunt's place on the west coast, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out of this endless grey cloud. I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, in the next video I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the effects of sleep deprivation and how it compounds small little errors and how they sort of add up. I mean, I've kind of been a little bit of a victim of that, where I haven't had a lot of sleep, and so I've made small little mistakes, including leaving this cabin light on, you having to jump start your car again and again. And honestly, when I got in the car now, I had no idea whether it would start. And when you're in a situation like that, you're in a place far from home. Being stranded is not great. You can rely on public goodwill to a certain point, and then you're not in a good situation. So we're going to speak a little bit more about sleep deprivation and susceptibility to errors of judgment, not just regarding me in this situation, but regarding Oscar and Reva on the 13th and 14th. Remember, the crime happened at 3 o'clock in the morning, at around about 3:15 in the morning, and we're going to look at the implications of that. Yeah, and I've made a couple of other notes to talk about, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So hopefully when you see me again, you'll see me in the sunshine. Hope so. Okay, see you.